Well, Daniel, you and I were talking earlier and just kind of going over the events of the last couple of weeks, the news cycle, particularly the events in Georgia and violence against women and violence against people of Asian descent, and thought it would be useful to just sit and I thought it would be useful for me to ask you to share how are you personally feeling and responding right now?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. It's been a strange time. It's been, strange to say the least. It's been something that I've been thinking about. It's something that I think has inundated the news feed, both in news outlets, as well as commentary from friends around the nation who are both grieving and saddened by the events that are happening. And it's been strange. It hasn't affected me directly. I don't know these particular women at all. There's no connection. I don't know relatives of, but certainly have friends in Atlanta. But it's something that I've been thinking about, I think every day, every single day since the shootings. It's strange, and it's so strange. One particular, I think, work day, I came into the office, I took a lunch, and I ate my car in the lunch, and I sat there eating my lunch, and I don't know where it came from, but just tears flowing. For these families and the loss of these 8 lives. And so, in some ways it's been a strange response. I haven't taken to social media. I haven't, really done that, post anything or go on any marches or protests, but it's been something that I've been thinking about deeply.
A couple of weeks ago we were preparing the liturgy and you said, can we include something in the prayers of the people for the community in Atlanta, but the Asian American community in particular? And I think maybe as your friend and as not a member of that community, I don't think I realized how significant the impact was on you and on the rest of the Asian American community in our midst. And is that your impression? And with the people that you've been talking to, that people are significantly impacted?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of grief. I think there's also some anger that we're seeing among friends. But someone asked me recently, how has this been affecting you recently? And I think the way I responded was, well, it's not just something that's happened recently. It's kind of an ongoing experience. And so, it doesn't feel like anything new. It feels like something old and something repeated and maybe just brought more to the attention by recent happenings around the nation. But it's affected us in different ways. Some more than others.
As you and I have gotten to know each other, I think we're learning how to communicate with one another. But you're certainly more reserved about those kind of conversations, and that has been my impression until getting that the Asian American community has been more reserved about responses to things like this. And you and I even had a conversation about this idea of the model minority. What does that mean? And is that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty loaded question, I think.
Okay.
But the model minority, this myth saying that Asian Americans are maybe perhaps the better minority of all the minority groups that are in the U.S. In a sense that why don't we just maybe be a little bit more reserved? Let's not ruffle feathers too much and be more like Asian Americans. But I don't think that's something sometimes the right way to do things. Sometimes always being quiet and always taking a back seat, or the invisibility. Some have said some comments about the invisibility of Asian Americans. Sometimes it's not always a good thing, but I know there's that minority myth, but yeah, there's nothing model about the Asian American minority.
And just because there's quiet doesn't mean there isn't pain, and it doesn't mean there isn't prejudice, and it doesn't mean there isn't difficulty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, part of the Asian culture, and I think if I can make a comment, and I don't think it's generally applicable to every single Asian American community, but for the most part, the way I grew up, the way of my upbringing was that we stay silent. We don't bring about unneeded attention. We stay quiet. We just bow our head and we go about our business. But that's the way I grew up, and so we don't bring attention to ourselves. We don't unnecessarily bring these to the limelight. We stay silent and kind of go about our business.
So, I mean, that there's certainly more to talk about, and we've talked about whether or not it can be the topic of a future cultural conversation, but just for the moment, my understanding, what you're saying is that I have Asian friends who may be suffering more than I realize, and more affected than they're sharing. How could I, or how should we, in a gospel way, care for our brothers and sisters in Christ?
I would say probably simply, I know we've heard this before. I mean, this is not our first cultural conversation, but I think listening to stories, I think is important. I think giving opportunity to for voices to be heard, for people to be seen, I think is important. I think praying for the Asian communities, and again, I know I say Asian very broadly, but in the Asian American context, there's many different nationalities and ethnicities that are part of that. But asking for stories, our stories are not the same. We have different stories. I can share with you different stories of racial prejudice, or of discrimination. Sometimes in loud acts of violence, and sometimes subtly. And so, but I would say maybe, just listening to different people's stories. I would say praying and encouraging. I think are two big things.
Yeah, and just for me to say, I'm so grateful, and I think it's because the gospel has brought us together that I have a gentle friend who will tell me rather than just let it slide, right? So I'm grateful for that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I think also the gospel brought us together, and we back in 2017 thought, hey, if God can bring two cultures together, certainly God has provided us a way by breaking down the dividing wall of hostility, and I think if anywhere, it's the church that needs to practice mutual submission. It's the church that needs to practice reconciliation, racial reconciliation, biblical reconciliation. If the church is that place, and if the world can see, because I don't think the world's going to respond the same way as the church, but if the church can be that model of what reconciliation looks like, of what breaking down dividing walls looks like, then I think there's a lot of power in that gospel witness.
Amen.
Amen.
More later. Thanks for listening.